Welcome to Season 2 of Love of One. This first episode opens with a powerful conversation with Rosemary Beam on shamanism, exploring what it means to walk between worlds and awaken the divine spark within. Welcome back to Love of One Healing and Transformation. Today, I am so honored and grateful to have Rosemary Beam join us today. She is a shaman practitioner and just shaman. I don't know. You can explain. Well, that'll be my first question is the difference between those two. And she's helped me along my journey. She's just so lovely and brings so much energy and knowledge and wisdom to the space and your healing that I am so lucky to have her joining me today. Rosemary, thank you so much for agreeing to be on this podcast and talking about what you do and how it works for people. I can't wait to dive in.
Thank you for asking me to be here. It's an honor and a pleasure, and working with you both as a client has been lovely, and this now I'm very excited about.
Thank you. I'd love to dive in with the first question. Shaman versus shaman practitioner. What are the differences between those two? Does it hold weight to masculine, feminine? Is it Native American versus non? I think those are some of the things that I'd like to just address that right away before we dive into the rest so that it's very clear.
That's an excellent place to begin. So shaman is actually a Tungus tribe word, and Mircea Eliade and Michael Harner popularized it in Western culture. And so these are an anthropologist, but he also was a regional geologist. So he merged the two. He also worked with Hank Wesselman. The term is actually not an English term. It's a Tungus tribe term. And what the word actually means, the word shaman, is a person who steps between two worlds. So is in the mundane and the divine. Then, as English-speaking and Spanish-speaking cultures do, we co-opt words and fit them into our language to describe something that isn't necessarily in our language. So that's shaman, the word. Shaman practitioner is someone who practices the techniques of a shaman, of someone who would be the medicine healer of a tribe, because that's really what that person is. In the Tungus tradition. In the Siberian, they would have a medicine person, and their designation is shaman. So they would be the people who heal both physical, spiritual, psychic, emotional strife in their village. And that word has been popularized around the world, and it kind of has co-opted the nature of a medicine person, or the name of a medicine person is, for instance, the practice that I practice, which is of the high mountains in Peru. The medicine men and women there are called Pacos, but because so much of it's such a tourist driven country that they actually call themselves shamans now to English speaking, French speaking.
So that they understand who they're talking. They have that likeliness, that understood kind of cultured word, if you would.
Right. And they understand that Paco is their indigenous tongue's word for a person who steps between the worlds, who communicates with the divine, who has a relationship with Pachamama, who knows everything is living, vital energy, and we're all connected. So no matter where you go in the world, every village would have had its medicine person. And so the word shaman is just the popularized one at this time in our collective consciousness.
I see.
So then a shamanic practitioner is someone who practices perhaps a collective style of healing, someone who might have a resonance with the Siberian tribes, may have a resonance with the stepping in between two worlds. Like I know that you do that, right? There is a way, and yet it is a way to identify more comfortably for some people than others. Like some people are like, they don't want to touch that word with the 10-foot pole. They don't want to have this conversation. And that's fine. The reason that I had decided that is what I do is because of multiple reasons. I grew up in a territory in California where there were indigenous people. My parents knew indigenous, and therefore my father had lots of deep relationships with indigenous people and learned a lot. And through osmosis and through some direct experiences, my father actually taught me some ways. And that basically shaped my entire life. And in my astrology charts and so forth, I'm what's called a bridge walker, which is having one foot in the divine and one foot in the mundane. And then the other piece of it is I've spent decades training with the Karen specifically and other groups in the Amazon. And they have basically welcomed me in as one. And so it's not me saying, oh, that's how I identify. It's them actually saying, no, this is actually, we're asking you to do this. And
You were offered
yeah,
directly from Pachamama and the natives. Yeah.
right. And so that's really the difference. And so when I teach, I am teaching what I have been given to teach in the collective way, because I have merged the teachings of the Karo, of the high mountain wisdoms, of the connection to Pachamama and Aini, which is reciprocity and how to do that. And then I also study the Diamond Approach, which is a Sufi-based tradition, and have done for over 10 years. And they basically, this is how they look together. They basically mirror each other in different places on the planet and language, which is fascinating. And you can look at Tibetan Buddhism the same. Like they all talk about very similar frequencies, patterns, and practices.
How did you start down this path? You mentioned that you grew up in Native culture through your father, kind of showed you some ways. How did you dive deeper into that, and how did that transpire for you? Was it in the Andes Mountains? Was it before that? Did it kick into gear in a trip to Peru, or how did that work for you or happen for you?
If my parents were alive, they tell you that they don't know where I came from. Uh,
I get that.
and, kindly, but they're like, we don't know. It started very early. I was a rock collector from the time I can walk. And there's a story in my family where my mother saw me carrying a rock through the yard, and she went and grabbed it from me, and it was a 30-pound rock, and I was like 18 months old with this thing. And so the reason I mentioned that is the mesa, or the medicine bundle that I carry, that is the medicine bundle of the high Andes, is made up of rocks. And they're called kuyas once they're initiated and once you start your medicine practice. And kuya means beloved in Quechuan. But I liken that to how I got to here, right? Like I always felt like the wind was talking to me. The rocks were talking to me. I would literally hear the rocks, and Maestro Luis will speak about these creature beings called machulas, which are little beings that were here living on this planet before people populated the planet and before the sun really came into its brightness. And I feel like I've been hearing the machulas my whole life. And so over the course of my childhood, I would make offerings because I was taught if you want something, you make an offering and you ask if it's okay to take this stone. I was taught from the time I had language to do this, to be an Aini, to give and to ask, and don't take if it's not given. And so that's really where it all started. Then as a teenager and in college, I became an avid lover of Jung and his teachings and dream work, and the fact that he really worked and looked at indigenous cultures for clues to how our psyche is structured. That's why we have the unconscious, the conscious, and the superconscious. So the three layers of the cosmology of the medicine realm, which is world, middle world, upper world. I still have that in my bones and how that led me to here. I didn't stay in college due to circumstances and events and car accident and so forth, but I continued to study, continued reading, meeting people who were, masters at one thing or another. And I had sight from a very young age. And so I had teachers who were not of this realm.
Mhm.
And it always frustrated me. And so I spent many years saying, I'd really like a human to. And what multiples through time came in. Early in the 90s, I met some medicine people who were very saturated in Japanese medicine.
Yeah.
Then in the early 2000s, trained in that, studied with one of the top healers in using gems, became an apprentice of the person. So her name was Melody, and she wrote the Kaleidoscope of Crystals, and I actually trained with her students to become a certified practitioner and then became a certified teacher of her work. And then all of these things were kind of just, I stumbled into. It was just the universe said, here, do this, here, we do
Funny
that.
how that works. Yeah.
I just pay attention. I've learned over the decades, you just pay attention and go, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Or, well, if you want to do that, you have to actually make it happen.
Yeah. And then they pave the way for you.
Yeah, the door. And so I ended up studying with Alberto Villoldo for a time, and then a woman who actually taught with him, and she became a mentor and then a business partner and then an ex-business partner. And that whole set of circumstances is really what led me to Peru. The knocking on the door by the mountain that I had shared with you before we started is really what brought me to the high mountains and the teachers and masters of that particular tradition, which is really my home. And, I am white. I am American, of Italian, French, English, maybe German background. But what I know and what I tell people in classes that I teach is it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. There is a medicine person in the tribe that you are from. Tribal conflicts. What is now happening is those of us who are like, the status quo isn't working. The spiritual being has a longing, and the myths that are in our culture aren't working for me. Azangate is a holy mountain in Peru. He's considered the director mountain, and he's the one who came a knocking. And I just said, okay, well, do this. You have to figure out a way to get me to you. And I swear to you, not 3 days later, my mother-in-law came out and said, like 6 in the morning, she comes out and says, I have a surprise for you. And I was just like, let me get my coffee.
Yeah.
Tell me that there was a fund that grandma had set up for the kids, and I was still married to her son at the time. And so I was a grandchild, and that you could borrow from the fund to do whatever you wanted. You just have to pay it back. And I was like, I'm in. I got the funds. Apua Sangate he's just this majestic, absolutely powerfully grumpy, direct. He's the perfect benefactor for me. And so that's really where my journey begins, in the mountains of Peru. And that was in 2010, I think. This has been a lifetime journey, but I got to sit at the feet of this being in 2010 for the first time. I have since then studied with many of the Karo and have been invited to Karo, which is kind of an unusual thing to have happen. It has yet for me to go because it just didn't organize itself. In the next year or so, that should be happening.
Yeah, it's coming.
And they're incredible, incredible medicine men and women, incredible humans, they are,
Yeah.
but they have such depth of consciousness and heart and great relationship with the Pachamama. It's just, it's awe-inspiring, and they are human.
Yeah. And they're beautiful. I connect with the Karos too, as you know. They
Yeah.
seem to me quite often. Yeah.
And every time I see him, I just, whenever we're online together, whether it's Karina, his daughter, or Maestro and his wife, I just get so giddy, like I can't even contain myself.
Their energy is so beautiful.
They're just wonderful.
So let's dive in a little bit about all these things that you see and spirits and animals and totems that you bring in with all this really incredible background of your awakening, really, of this offering that your soul came here to accept and move forward with at this time, especially where we could all use it. How do you connect with people when people come to see you? Do you know right away? Because it's, with channeling, you make an appointment, they appear, right? Is it very similar with your work as a shaman where you're already connecting before you connect virtually to that person who comes to see you?
What's really interesting is what people tell me is I booked the appointment and then I was like, oh my God, it feels so much better. I'm just like, I don't even know if what I booked the appointment for will really need to work with right now. And so what I know to be true is like the luminous lineage and the legions of people, I'm going to say people, but the legions of energy beings that I have the absolute gratitude and delight to work with that have chosen me. I didn't choose them. They've all just come, right? Are usually on the job before I ever even see the notification come through, because that's our agreement. And so I will receive the notification. It may be someone I know, it may not be someone I know, and I'll do a little bit of tracking, which is the word that I use to describe how I perceive energy specifically for a particular person or a particular event or a particular something that's going to happen or that I'll be doing. And it isn't that guides come. It's more of I get a sense of what's needed. Then when I meet with them, Maestro Luis, I love how he says this. He calls it opening the big doors, right? So we open the doors for all the beings to be here. And then I ask who has actually come specifically for the person that I'm working with. And I often am amused because it's not the beings that I work with, which is perfect. That's too mundane. That's too rote for me. I remember working on a person years ago, and I'm calling in, opening the big doors, getting myself to be here with all the beings. And Jesus walks in, and I was like, hey, you're
Usually not.
Because he's not the one that I work with, but he's a master healer, right? He actually has hands that are skilled for surgical precision. It was just beautiful. In that way, I don't let my own lineup control. That would be egoic. It would be projecting. There's a whole lot of, I'm going to say, healer bad behavior that would go on if I was like, you can't be here, because that's not my job. My job is to hold the space, call it in, ask what needs to be done, and do it and listen. That's really how I ask to meet and greet everyone who's here for the particular person or the particular place on the land that we're doing a healing process. I have my beings that I have a deep relationship with that, of course, I call in so that I have what I need.
Your support.
Then, of course, then calling in what the other needs, because they're the ones who have come for help. People's guides who show up know way more than I do about what that person needs. So it's my job to really call in, listen, ask questions, listen some more, ask more questions, do what needs to be done, ask more questions, and then
Let it proceed.
Right.
Do you find that animal spirits always come in during your session? Or is that in and out?
For me, because I liken it to my wiring.
Mm-hmm.
It's not anything special. It's just I'm wired more relationally to the natural world. For instance, when I was on my vision quest, I just wanted a bear and an elk to come bed down with me and just spend the night with me, teach me, do whatever, scare the shit out of me. I don't really care.
All of it.
Just all you big beasts, come and hang out with me.
Uh-huh.
Well, I got bats, slugs, and dragonflies.
Oh,
Which is fabulous, powerful, right? But
very.
it was like, really? All the elf went to the fire where my husband was. So they say that in the teachings when you are learning how to perceive, what you perceive is what you can tolerate
At
seeing
that time.
at that particular nano moment. I just have a deep relationship with the natural world, with the animal kingdom. And so they will come more often, other beings, unless I call in the luminous lineage or unless I'm specifically going up to the upper world and seeking counsel with the Star Nation and with the beings that reside in that realm. Sometimes come in a regular calling in, but my comfort area is with beasts. And there's a little story. Years ago, I was working with the client and this giant 12-foot huge blackbird came in and I'm like, what are you doing here?
That was huge. Yeah.
He gave me some instructions and I'm like, who are you? And he said his name, Metatron. Okay. And so we were done. Thank you very much. Hope to see you again. Come in a little more announced. Thanks. Yes. I went downstairs to the bookstore and I actually was rifling through books because I'm like, who is Metatron?
Oh, you hadn't?
I had heard, but like I didn't have a working understanding of it. And I cracked this one book open and I was like, oh, I get it. I would have never have allowed what I saw on that page to be in the room in that moment in my life.
Without being a bird. Yeah.
I would be like, who do you think you are? Get out. But now he comes as he is.
Yes.
This bright, shining, beautiful being. I speak to that because I feel like it's really important for us to not get all twisted around who comes and who doesn't, how we see things, how we don't.
I agree.
How shift, because it's a natural, organic shifting
Process,
and
right?
learning and process and
What they're
traction.
ready for in that moment.
And
Because I've heard, especially through all these different podcasts, Rosemary, that if you tell somebody or show somebody more than they're ready for, they can retrieve backwards and pause and fault on their process. It freaks them out, right? So that's why it's important to say that. So thank you for sharing that for our listeners, because that really is important. Just because it's a big, huge black bird doesn't mean it's not a big, huge, awesome being that has a really great healing or message for you.
And I know myself, like all my guides, and I joke when I'm teaching, I'm like, I argue with my guides. Everyone's like appalled. And I'm like, no, my guides are my guides. They know I argue.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a disrespectful thing. It's a like really kind of thing.
I joke with mine a lot. Mine are very funny. And everyone who works with mine, they're like, guys are really funny. And I said, they are. They're little jokesters. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and that goes to the card we
The
pulled today.
trickster card. Yes.
Yes, I pulled a card for us today. We both had our candles lit, and the card I pulled for this podcast interview was Coyote.
Yeah.
Can I just let out? Yes, just everything that happened this morning, and of course it would be Coyote.
Yeah.
And some people get really freaked out by trickster, don't understand the tricky backwards teaching of that it can freak people out because trickster is mayhem maker of all the guides.
Yeah.
Right.
So my guides being so funny and trickstery, they give me everything in a riddle. Everything. Because they get when I'm like, oh, I get it. And then I can hear and see them like they throw a party. I do that all the time. Yeah. Everybody receives differently and everyone perceives differently. And mine are, they're really thanks. Constant
right?
riddling. Constant riddling.
The trickster, they're the ones that pull the rug out from underneath the king or the court jester who plays fun at everything that's going on. It's really to stop the seriousness of everything and to make us really look at ourselves and others and our projections. There's an aspect of trickster for me that is backward teaching. I am dyslexic, so I
Mhm.
see in a weird kind of way, language and so forth. And I invert numbers. I could never be an accountant. It just wouldn't work. But trickster learning backwards is I learned so much stuff very early on that when I actually started to do the mythological work and the work with even Alberto and the Caro, it was like, oh, I've been doing that for years. I perceive that way. I get what they're saying. Again, this backwards feels like you're catching up, but you're already there,
Mhm.
which can be very challenging for people who don't have a sense of humor.
Yeah, to point on the trickster really quickly, a lot of people also have this notion that if it's a trickster card or trickster energy, that it's negative all the time. And it's not. I feel like it's a lot of getting in touch with your inner child, which a lot of us need to do more of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That very playful, very nonsensical, very childlike,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
Right.
big
And
difference.
so it's, kids will color out of lines and do all kinds of stuff and paint on the walls until they're told that's not okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, we want to be more childlike.
hmm These are some of the tools that you use with your sessions. I saw one other shaman a long time ago, and they seem to use different tools as well. You pull cards, which we discussed, and in one of our sessions, not too long ago, it was kind of funny, but so powerful because we didn't have the same deck, but we chose the same cards
Oops.
separately. I was like, oh my gosh. And then, but you also use rocks and crystals. When
Yeah.
you mentioned that in your teachings for your craft and your healing, that you went in with gems and crystals. And then another thing, because we definitely are on the same page, we were both wearing same crystals.
We did not talk about this.
No, same with the cards. I pulled mine way before I logged in, like hours before I logged into you. And then you also use music or rattle. You also
Mhm.
use rattles, and I noticed that shamans often use rattles, drums, grasses, plants within their teachings. Can you talk about the use of those and what their significance is outside of other practitioners that are not shaman or shaman practitioners? Because they don't seem to use all those same tools in the same way either.
Right. So the one thing that's really important using a drum or a rattle or like the shapibo, the ashwar, the shwar, they'll use dried reeds
Mm,
from well to create that rattle sound,
okay.
right?
Mhm.
So the thing about rattles and drums and reeds, flutes and bowls, Tibetan bowls, crystal bowls. I have a beautiful Tibetan bell that's got a
Mm,
door. It clears the space. The
mm,
thing about those instruments, those tools, are that they actually disperse energy and coalesce energy. So based on
mm,
what's needed, that is what they're used for in a healing session. If you are journeying, it's really the person's preference as to what they're most in alignment with or most supported by, whether it be a rattle or a drum. As you can see, I have drums and
mm.
all of them
Beautiful.
are handmade. They each have a story and a use. But that rhythm that a drum has, the heartbeat of the mother,
Mhm.
will actually shift our brainwave that we're able to get out of the thinking mind and into the mythic mind, journeying mind, and rattles can do the same thing. So that's
I see.
one of the other uses of a drum and rattle is to actually get us from that beta delta into theta, that we can have an easier time journeying in non-ordinary reality, which is a term that was coined by Michael Harner, a school of shamanism that stripped all of the, I'm going to say, spiritual, ritual, religious parts of all the traditions from different tribes around the world and just did the core shamanic practices.
I see.
His school was core shamanism. The reason why the drum and the rattle is so proficient and used is that it can replicate the heartbeat of the earth, which we are so disconnected from. Think about when we go out into the forest and we do forest bathing, we come back and we're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. It's because of it's resetting our circadian rhythms. We're actually recalibrating our body to the frequency of Pachamama, which is referred to as human frequency. They've proved all of this stuff scientifically, what the shamans have known for
Forever.
millennia.
Since creation. Yeah.
The thing that I would say about picking up a drum and a rattle, and I really hated rattles in the beginning, then I developed a love of them. And it's being in the right presence with them, the right frame, understanding that you're not just shaking a rattle to shake a rattle and to be like everybody else or to be like the person you're training with. There's actually purpose to it, and there's a frequency. The frequency of the two rattles that I use are mine. I don't know how else to describe it. And they get in and pull apart energy that needs to be pulled apart in a very particular way, and then we can get it removed. Same with the drums. And each of them has a particular medicine because there's a deer, a buffalo, horse, and a bear. And they all have when they want to be worked with. And so you just have to use your sacred hearing or sacred sight for when they're like, hey, I'm up.
Oh, that makes sense. I joined a women's drum making circle a couple years ago under a tree at this lady's house who makes these beautiful drums. I connected with a horse hide. When I sat there in stillness, with my hands on it and breathed in, I saw it and I asked what its name was, and it was Ezekiel. So my drum is called Ezekiel, and I started putting it together. And I tell you what, it is the most beautiful sounding drum I've ever heard because I connected with it. Not everyone hears it the same way as I do, but wow, it is so powerful. I've always been so resonant with drumming, and now it makes total sense from the perspective of the heartbeat of the mother.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think about it, it can be just as altering as like a sound bath because you're working with the frequency to dislodge what doesn't serve you or to bring you into point with something that you need to observe.
Or alignment. Yeah. Yeah. You also work with some elements too. You recently had a fire dance thing. I wish I could have gone, but I had to be somewhere else. Let's talk about the fire element in particular, because a lot of practitioners talk about the water, of course, Pachamama, and the air, but not a lot of people really talk about the fire aspect. And I know that it really resonates with you and your spirit. Can you dive in a little bit about the fire?
Oh, yes. I want to say this. I was raised in Northern California on a volcano. The translation of the native tongue for that name of that volcano is Fire Mountain. And I didn't come to learn this until I was already steeped in this tradition.
Kind of sounds like a riddle from your tricksters.
Exactly. Fire ceremony is really one of my absolute favorite loves. I love holding public fire ceremonies, both after doing a prayer ceremony, which is called a despacho, and fire ceremony in and of itself because it's so potent. Fire ceremony is something where you can do it solo with a candle. And I do have to plug this candle. It's Mithra candles are amazing. This is all organic wax and organic dyes. They are non-toxic. They're amazing. They're in Philadelphia. You could do fire ceremony, and I've done hundreds of fire ceremonies with candles. What you're looking for is the flame. I've literally been out in the middle of nowhere where you should not light a fire, and I've just got my lighter, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing fire.
Yeah, we're doing it. Yeah.
What I say is your imagination is the limits that you put on yourself. So whatever you can imagine, you can do. So in community, it's just luscious. We have this beautiful fire pit that my husband and I built in our backyard, and we have a fire altar and earth altar. And so people come and they make offerings that we provide or that they bring to the land to introduce themselves. They make offerings to fire to introduce themselves. And then we gather. The whole idea of the fire is to bring to it yourself in your entirety and to offer your dense energy, your hucha, your troubles, your pain,
Mm,
your grief, your illness to the fire, right?
mhm,
There's a way I teach you how to do that. Then once you feel like that has been released and you've filled yourself up with the frequency of fire, because the whole idea is to shift, to transform, to transmute so that we are all vibrating at the frequency of light. Then we have the opportunity to pray. It's really powerful because you have all these, the last fire, and there were 22 people around, right? Not everybody was at fire at one time, but there were good 9, 10 people at fire at once. And everybody else holding space for people praying. And so you have this opportunity to pray with fire. We use sticks in this tradition.
okay.
And the stick that we used was all the trimmings off the rosemary bush. And we pray in to the sticks by blowing your breath onto the stick, right? So feel what you're feeling, whether it's anxiety, grief, love, desire, whatever, and you blow it in. I encourage people to not get linear in their thinking.
Mhm.
If there's something linear that you're wanting to call in, that's fine, but feel into your body where it lives in you and how it
Mm,
lives in you that in. And then give that as a gift to the fire. Is the fire consumes it, mulches,
yeah.
and it gets released to spirit. What I share with people is I've been to so many fires and prayed so much. It's actually the way that I like to pray the
Mm,
best. Why? It's because fire really gets it done. It is such a quick transformer of energy. Sometimes when you walk away from fire, your prayer has already been answered.
mhm,
Have a message on your phone on your way home, and it's like,
mhm.
holy
Wow.
cow, it happened
Yeah.
while I was fire.
Yeah. With all these tools and the fire and the rattles and the spirit beings and the animals that come forth, what do people need to do after they see a shaman with integration and having that experience of, wow, what just happened? Because I know with our sessions afterwards, I'm like, I freight train.
What?
What? I go, "Whoa, how do I sit with that?" So what I've been doing is going out and literally laying in the dirt. And I did take a hoe or whatever and dug into my grass like told you I was going to. So I did exactly what I said. What do you have other people do, or what's your good recommendation for that after they have a shaman experience? Because they can be very eye-opening and almost like a mini medicine ceremony without the plant medicine, but the energy medicine.
Yeah, you can get blown wide open, which is good, and you need support on
Yeah.
the back end. And as you know, I give homework.
Mhm.
And I also give the authority to the person to reach out to me
Mhm.
if this happens, or if this is a struggle, or if you're like, what the hell is happening? Reach out to me. The dialogue. And then if I feel like you got this, then and you're going to go do an earth painting, or you're going to go on a hike and commune with a lake, or whatever sorts out from that, and you'll do that. And if it feels like you actually need support in an integrative way, I'll say, okay, let's get you back on my schedule, and we're going to do some integration. That could look so many different ways. I do some gestalt integrations, which is, we call it sacred drama. You can talk to pieces and parts of yourself or dynamics that you normally couldn't in just your regular everyday waking life. People who experience that tend to be blown away because they're like, I had no idea I could talk to that aspect. I'm like, well, right, because that's not what we're taught. That's why we're here. That's a very helpful integration. Another thing that I actually love helping people with is when they have gone to South America and they've done a journey and they're having a hell of a time coming back to this culture. That is one of my specialties, is to help people integrate from an actual plant medicine journey that they're having
That's
some
good to
struggle.
know. That's good to know about that resource because a lot of people that I know personally who have come back really struggle for that integration. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly why I had scheduled another session with you before I even went to plant ceremony. And I'm like, why do I need to see her so soon? And as you know, I really needed the help with my
Yeah.
integration. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And that's really good to know because a lot of people especially that go out of the country for that experience, don't know any resources here in the States or any other country if they're coming back. How do I integrate what was spectacular and so big and maybe perhaps a little bizarro to get back into real life and get
Right.
back in my body? Some people I know come back and they're still floating out in there. They need real
It's
help
not.
coming back in.
And one of the things that I do when I do take people to South America, whether it be Ecuador or Peru, is we do a significant pre-boarding, and then we do a significant during the actual retreat interactions, downloads, processing, and then we do a post and integration and celebration. Then everybody knows I'm available if something goes strange. When you
Fair.
get to work, you're like, I can't do my job. or
Yeah, or I don't want to be here. Yeah.
I don't want to be here. I don't know how to put my pants on and go to work. That's actually one of the things that I delight in doing, is helping people actually come back to themselves whole with what they came here to do. I don't mean that in the way that the language that we use means. It doesn't mean when you go and have these experiences that you've come back and you know you're going to be an accountant. Like, that's not it. It's more of how you're going to be in the world, in what frequency,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. How you're
And
evolving.
that's really hard for people who are left brained. Be like, I'm supposed to be what? There's ways to help their mind come into understanding of what that looks like in a living being in this culture.
And anchor into that and in a
Right.
way that makes sense for them with
Right.
balance.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think about my husband, he's in construction, and he's had long career of it and multiple different. One of the things that I've always said to him is, you're the shaman on the job. You're the guy who's there making sure that the land and the beings are respected, and that you're giving offerings to. He does. He gives offerings during the day at this incredibly gargantuan job site.
Well,
And so
it's how you
that's
find
really
that to bring it together in your real world and everyday practice,
right.
regardless of what your profession is. No, I like
Yes.
beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Because it's easy for me. I mean, I have transitioned. I work in my home. My office is in my home. My ceremonial space is in my backyard. It's way easier for me to do the practices on a daily basis
Yes.
because
You're living it.
it's like it's just insulated to do that.
Yes.
Um,
Using these tools.
yeah. And that's how I could use these tools in that moment in my life.
I love that. Rosemary, what other things do you offer? And I think you're about to launch something pretty spectacular into the world in another offering. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what you offer and how they can reach you before we end this awesome conversation today?
Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you for having me. This
Sure.
is such a
My,
pleasure, so much
my honor.
fun. Yes. So you can reach me at rising-fire.com. That's the website, the best way in. Then what I offer is individual healing sessions, couples healing sessions, children's work with animals as well, who are, people's children.
Yes. I love that.
Yes, it's very sweet. I'm called a dog godmother,
Oh,
which I think is cute. Yeah, the medicine wheel that's been on hiatus for 2 years, and it will be starting back up in this fall. We will start accepting applications, and we're currently on our website have a wait list. If you're interested in the deeper teachings of how to use these tools for yourself
wow.
and to develop a medicine bundle. It's a 2-year program. It's one of my absolute favorite things to do.
Wow.
Then after that will be healers training from the cohorts of the medicine wheel. Then healers training will be offered, which is another 2-year cycle for people who are really interested in doing similar to what I do. I tell people, don't ever try to be me, because that's not goal. Your goal is the best you that you
Yeah.
can be.
I love that.
Just learn the tools and then develop them into your practice. The really exciting project that is coming soon I'm not giving a date because I don't have a date, but if we are hoping 2025, we will be releasing a program called The Way of Aini. It is a collaboration between Maestro Luis and myself. He had asked me to do teachings with him so that we could translate it to English. And it was originally going to be live, and that didn't work out. So we did do this intense month of pre-recording, and it's almost through the editing process.
Very nice.
And it'll be at your own pace. We have a student portal that once a person's interested in and they purchase the program, they have access to the student portal and to the 10 sessions and all the different support documents and information that go along with it.
Awesome.
I just can't even tell you how amazing it is. And just the honor, I'm so grateful that he asked me to do this with him because
Wow, that's beautiful.
That just speaks volumes to me.
Congratulations too. And that's beautiful. Anytime we can co-create with those that we learned from is always such a beautiful space to hold.
Yeah. He and his family, they're just a delight. They're just full of love, Moonai. The great thing about this program is that it is a way that we will be able to help support them financially ongoing during times where, because it's such a tourist-driven economy, this will actually help them, both their family and the Karo Nation. One of the creme de la creme of this is that there will be a select group of people that will be invited to go with me to Karo to do ceremony in their homelands.
Wow.
I know.
How do I get on that list,
Let
Rosemary?
me just throw me. It's all a part of purchasing the program, and you're on the list. And we'll just make sure that we'll make sure you're on the list. Yeah, it's
so amazing.
When they told me that, I was just like, "Oh, this is so devastating." Yeah,
That's beautiful.
It's a treat. One other thing that's really exciting that I've been working on for 20 years, I have developed a water that is, for the most part, non-toxic. There's no chemical compounds. There's no man-made chemicals in the sacred water. There are essential oils, which one could be allergic to. And there is alcohol that is made on Mount Haleakala, which I think is fabulous. And then the sacred water that is used is charged with maikuya from Mount Asangate. And so it's a new type of Florida water that is non-toxic for people who are sensitive, as I am. It's called Apuyaku. So we'll be releasing that as well.
That sounds awesome. I'm so excited for all these new things for you that you're co-creating and just creating and bringing out into the world. I love it. For those of you that are still interested in all the information, how to contact her, and maybe sign up for your newsletter to get all these dates, I would assume all of her information will be at the end of this episode and will also be in the description of this episode for as long as it exists out into the world. Rosemary, thank you so much. It's such a fun conversation and such great information for our listeners and our community. So once again, thank you so much for all of your wisdom.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me here. And I love that we were wearing the same necklace.
I just love it.
Thank
you.
Yeah. Gratitude for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. You can connect with Rosemary at rising-fire.com and find more episodes, offerings, and upcoming events at loveofone.com.